In this demonstration, I'm going to discuss the various gauges and animations under the Gauge button. The first one is the vertical gauge, which is this gauge right here. It has quite a few settings. These two are of note. When these two are enabled, the gauge gets its value max and value min from the point that it is monitoring. So if we enabled this gauge looking at analog 1, and we turned on use inherited units and use inherited ranges at runtime, these two values would be replaced with whatever the value of engineering units high and low are for the tag, and this units would be replaced with the units for the tag. And this is provided for a way to change the analog point range without having to go and locate any gauges that reference that analog tag and make changes to it. This value here is provided for a way to see what it's going to look like at design time. It doesn't have any effect at runtime. So you see it changed to 75. Next gauge is time date, which is this one right here. It has really just a couple of attributes. This is the attribute that specifies how the time and date are to be displayed, or just the time or just the date. Offset is for the hours offset if you're doing different time zones from this computer. The help file defines what all of the mask values are to format the string. You can use whatever format you want. Next one is MA station 2-bar, which is this guy right here. It's a fairly complicated element. This is used for connections to PID blocks inside of an external device. This is typically the process variable, this is typically the control variable, or the output controlling the valve or the motor or whatever. These guys on the left, far left and far right, are alarm set points. These here in the middle are limits. At runtime there's a slider to, if it's enabled, to slide it up and down so you can change the set point or change the output. This is to switch the PID into manual or auto, and these are buttons that can be used to execute scripts to increase or decrease the set point or output a certain amount, 5%, 4%. Fast mode is to switch between one percentage value, for example 5, and another one, for example 10. This is just an area that can be configured to place text to let them know certain values. These MA stations are configured via the MA stations editor. Each MA station has to have a name, and it has to have a configuration. And the reason it's done this way is because this window may be for 4 or 5 different, for example, pumps that are all the same, but the MA station needs to be different. When the window is opened, the MA station name can be set to an MA station configuration so that the correct values can be displayed based on which one the user desires. These are the different values to configure the MA station. This is the common area. This is the left bar, left slider, middle text area, which is this area, the bottom text area. Lots of settings, lots of configurations. If you decide to use this MA configuration editor. There are many things you can set it up for. The next one is a trend, and we discussed that in another video demonstration. Camera is just a camera. It's an IP camera or a VFW. It's discussed in another demonstration. It's just a way to link the camera to an image on the screen. You would select camera. Here would be your image. You would double click on it, select video, select the camera. We don't have any cameras configured. You can configure the left and mouse button to do certain or take certain actions. For example, if you had capture, it would do a frame capture. It would take a picture of the camera input at that time. If you selected record, it would start recording or stop recording if recording was already in process. Needle meter we discussed in the various analog animations demonstration video. That's a needle meter up there. It has many different settings. LCD display is this guy right here in the middle. It has some settings. You can change the appearance of the cells themselves, frame colors. See, that went from square to round. Angular gauge 1 is this gauge right here. It has different bands. It has quite a few settings also. Shockwave. Shockwave is to play a Shockwave file. You would select the source of the file. You would select the source. This is used to start or stop the Shockwave file. You would select the source of the file here. We don't have any currently on this machine, so there's nothing to select. These different settings are defined in the help file. You can start it at a certain frame number or restart at a certain frame number. Digital grid. This is a digital grid. A digital grid has rows and 2 columns. And it has these other attributes, but it can be used to show, for example, if you had some permissives to start a pump. You could have you could list the permissives and show the ones that are allowable or allow the pump to start in green and the ones to not show in red. You can also select a flash if they're one or the other, or you can just show the simple state of opened is okay when it's true, closed is not. When it's off, closed is not opened is bad, so we have this as flash. These are mouse commands, commands to take when the mouse is pressed. We'll discuss these in another video. Analog grid is like the digital grid right here. It has rows and 2 columns, and it's used to display analog values. So, for example, in this case we have a pump, and we want to show the pressure and the flow of the pump. It could be like a cracking tower, and it could show the different pressures or temperatures as it goes up the tower. These are alarm colors and normal colors. And if this is checked and it's an alarm, it'll flash between these 2 colors. And it also has the mouse commands. If the user presses the mouse button inside the row, also has the decimal count for how many decimals to show. This is just an example for design time. Animated GIF. This is an animated GIF. You could use this for simulation of a conveyor or water flow, anything that you can use for animated GIFs. Jog meter. This is a jog meter. And a jog meter, the scale behind the indicator moves. So for example, if we change this value to 9, we see the meter moved and not the indicator. I see this sometimes on you can also set it for vertical. I see this sometimes on levels. We skipped the LED meter, LED bar, which is this bar right here. It has several different settings: color, number of cells, number of steps, block height, for example, is the height of the cells in the middle. Make them smaller. This is a scrolling marquee, which is this guy right here. It has a few different settings. Speed, steps. For example, you can tell it to step more pixels per step. See, so now it's very fast, but it's moving many steps. Instead of 4, it's now doing 14. If we change it to 1, the speed stays the same, but it only moves 1 pixel per step. And that's it for the gauges. Most of the gauges use this gauge animation, but some have their own, like the Marquee and the Shockwave and the grids. It just depends on what the gauge is doing. If it's complex, it typically has its own, or if it needs some other settings that aren't just a simple indicator of a value.